absolutely is incredible that anybody who's done education above the age of 11 can advance the argument that we have in our country one disastrous, tragic legalised poison, and that therefore we should have another one. I mean, how can anybody with a working mind advance this as an argument?
Hello and welcome to Spectator TV. I'm John Connolly, the Spectator's news editor. This week, London Mayor Sadiq Khan called for the decriminalisation of cannabis in the capital. But is that the right thing to do? Joining me to discuss is Peter Hitchens, the Mail on Sunday columnist and author of The War We Never Fought, The British Establishment's Surrender to Drugs. Peter, thank you for joining us on Spectator TV.
Well, it's a complete joy so far.
So far, we'll see how it goes now. So yesterday, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan backed the decriminalisation of cannabis in the capital, came after a report by Lord Faulkner. Yeah. He wants to decriminalise it for small amounts of personal use in particular. I wondered if you thought, first of all, I mean, there's maybe a bit of irony here in that a lot of the capital and the rest of the country kind of stinks of cannabis already. And
well, exactly.
Would you notice if it was decriminalised, do you think?
Where do these people live? Much of London, particularly in the summer months, stinks of skunk and has done for years. And if you go into the parks in the summertime, the same thing is so. And if you go into the park on the 20th of April, the International Feast Day of Marijuana, it's full of people smoking dope. The police are not interested. I think they have some vestigial interest in using marijuana possession as a holding charge, but for general purposes, they long ago ceased to have any interest in suppressing its use. In fact, this goes back, I've written a history of it, called The War We Never Fought. This goes back really to the inception of the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act, which was designed to give marijuana a special status and also to treat possession of the drug, which is in fact the principal crime, as less important than dealing. Why dealing is bad if the drug itself is not bad, I don't know.
Do you think there is an element to Sadiq Khan's argument in the sense of the law is capricious at the moment? I mean, like you say, like the police seem to generally ignore cannabis use except when it's convenient for them. Therefore, it kind of makes sense not to make that fair across the board and decriminalise it entirely for possession.
Well, the first part of the argument makes sense, and the Runciman report back now 20 years ago, I think, was making roughly the same point, that things were inequitable, that you could get different treatment in different parts of the country, to which my response is, in that case, make sure everybody gets the same treatment, apply the law in all cases. Now, either you have a law and apply it, or you don't have it and you don't apply it. The problem with this country is it has an elite which actually is quite sympathetic to the use of drugs, and in many cases is composed of people who have used them or use them now or let their children use them. And you have an international treaty which this country is bound to, and particularly bound as a member of the United Nations Security Council, which obliges us to maintain quite severe laws against marijuana possession. Solution: keep the laws, don't enforce them. That's what they've been doing, more or less since the 1971 Act was passed.
I mean, the report recommends in particular that there should be more focus on sort of service use and services focused on problematic and addiction. Do you support that?
No, I mean, it's a crime. Possession of marijuana is a crime. It's not a health problem. It's a decision to do something illegal, which can have extremely damaging consequences. Marijuana possession and the use of it is not a victimless crime. The person who does it and who demands a weakening of the law so that others can do it, has consequences for himself. He will become quite possibly mentally ill, and others will likewise become mentally ill. That will ruin their lives and the lives of their families. It will also make everybody involved a charge on the state and the taxpayer for the rest of their lives. And there are growing indications. I have to say I can't rely on any research on this because for some reason nobody's done any, and for some reason the police don't keep records of it. But there seems to be some indication, if you look at what happens carefully in violent crime, that there are large numbers of violent crimes taking place now committed by people who have become mentally ill through marijuana use. So it's not victimless. It's not victimless to do it. It's not victimless to desire the laws to be weakened.
I suppose with the link to violent crime, it's probably quite hard to pick apart the correlation, though, right? So if a violent person is more likely to use cannabis, that doesn't necessarily mean that the cannabis causes the violent behaviour.
I'm
right?
always being told that marijuana is such a peaceful drug and so soft. So why would that be? But my friend Ross Granger produced a large dossier, which he then compiled into a book called Attack at Smoked Cannabis. He did a survey of local newspaper reports of violent crime and found that in huge numbers of cases, the perpetrator was a long-term marijuana user. And he still keeps in touch with me and alerts me to these things as they happen every few weeks at least, some of them very serious indeed. It's not. It's just not. There isn't very much doubt in it. Also, if you look internationally, for instance, the rampage killings and mass shootings in the United States, the perpetrator is often a long-term marijuana user. The recent school shooting in Uvalde. So the New York Times at first reported it and then dropped the information from its website and never put it in the newspaper. I took steps to check it. Because being a national newspaper journalist, I can do that. And we traced the original source of the New York Times story, and she said absolutely it was true. She had no doubt at all that the perpetrator of the Uvalde shootings had been a marijuana user. But this kind of thing is not welcome among the lobby which presses for it. Anybody who knows anything about the mental health system in this country knows that there are very large numbers of marijuana users in mental hospitals. And it just isn't. It isn't in question. It's just there is an absence of serious research because research isn't just done. It's not like the weather. People don't just research things because they're there to be researched. Research is done because somebody has an interest in doing it. Well, who has an interest in researching the dangers of marijuana? Not the extremely powerful billionaire lobby which wants it legalized. They for certain don't. Nor our political class, which is compromised by its own use of it.
Do you not accept at all that if marijuana was legalized, there would be better services for getting people off addiction?
No, it's not a question of addiction. It's another argument here, which I'm not proposing to have. It's a question of people willfully doing something which they know to be wrong. The jurisdictions where it has been legalized, notably Canada and several of the American states, the effects of legalization has been not to produce any of the results which the pro-legalizers claimed. They said it would mean that the drug would be legalized and its strength controlled, and so on and so forth. And this all turned out to be bilge because what happened, as I predicted when it was put forward, and it was easy to predict, it wasn't exactly Nostradamus territory, the black market would continue to exist, the criminal gangs would continue to sell at whatever strengths people wanted. And they were also free of tax, so they could undercut them. So legalization doesn't actually achieve anything at all except allow people to make more money out of it. Something everybody now despises. They utterly despise the tobacco companies for their behaviour when they knew perfectly well that their product was killing people in a hideous fashion, continued to promote it, lobbied against restrictions on it. Now we have the opposite end of the spectrum. We have a very large lobby which knows perfectly well that its product is correlated strongly with lifelong mental illness and a number of other problems, and they continue to push using large amounts of money and clout for its actual legalization when it's not legal. It's so bad. I mean, it's just such a wicked, evil thing to do that I'm surprised they can hold their heads up in public, but they do it.
Not that much different to the alcohol industry, though.
Well, the alcohol is legal.
Alcohol
is legal. I mean, I sat impotently. I was an absolutely nothing reporter on the Daily Express in the middle 1980s, when the Tory government at the time dismantled the very sensible licensing laws we had against alcohol, with disastrous results, and followed up by the Blair government, which then weakened them still further. We did have very strong restrictions on alcohol in this country, which I supported and would bring back tomorrow if I could. But once something has become permanently legal, even the Islamic Republic of Iran, with its secret police and its torture chambers and everything, cannot suppress the use of alcohol. You can go to Iran, where it's utterly illegal, and I promise you, if you wish to buy alcohol, you can have someone around your hotel or your apartment in 10 minutes bringing it to you. You cannot suppress it once it's been legalized. That's why legalization is such an important issue. It's irreversible once you do it.
If it is
and
de facto,
there's no argument. It is absolutely, it's incredible that anybody who's done education above the age of 11 can advance the argument that we have in our country one disastrous, tragic legalized poison, and that therefore we should have another one. I mean, how can anybody with a working mind advance this as an argument? Tell me, because I don't understand it.
But Peter, your point is that essentially that once something has been legalized, the genie's out of the bottle, you can't make it illegal again.
Well, it's not my argument, it's a demonstrable fact.
But then your also argument is that cannabis has essentially been de facto legalized in this country.
But not de jure.
Isn't that the same thing?
Not de jure, no. The legal point is crucial. As long as the law remains, you can't point to the state and say, "Oh, you legalized it," and then you delegalize it. As long as they don't legalize it, that point has not been passed. The point of no return is the legalization.
Turning to a different point, the report mentions, and it seems to be sort of a particular concern of Sadiq Khan, that drug criminalisation laws in the capital have led to a sort of gulf between the police and ethnic minority communities, particularly London's black community, with the use of stop and search. What did you make of that argument?
Well, if he says so, I seldom see any police officers in London, but maybe this is going on. But if it is so, if the police are disproportionately targeting black and other minority ethnic people in the pursuit of marijuana possession, then I absolutely agree that they should arrest more white people. They should have squads out in Kensington and Chelsea where they would find plenty of takers, people who didn't just smell of it but were carrying it if they wanted to. I'm an absolute equal opportunity stop and searcher, but it's a very, very poor argument for ceasing to enforce the law. That you aren't enforcing it properly in the first place. If they're not enforcing it, he's the Mayor of London. He can talk to the Metropolitan Police Commission. He can say to him, why aren't you targeting white people as well? If your beef is that the numbers being searched are disproportionately black and minority ethnic, then my answer is search more white people. I can't see any counter to that. The law should be enforced. It does terrible damage, and here is the absolute key to the enforcement of the marijuana laws. It's really, it's a law in favour of parents who sit terrified as their children go to school and grow older, that those children will become marijuana users and their lives will be ruined. And not merely will their lives be ruined, but of course their parents' lives will be ruined and their siblings' lives will be ruined, because having somebody in your family whose mind has been destroyed after marijuana use is an inescapable, hellish thing to happen. And it doesn't go away. They don't ever get better. So they're terrified of this and they look to authority to do something about it. And what does authority do? It preaches harm reduction in schools, i.e. take it, you can take it safely, guys, everything will be fine. It says absolutely nothing about enforcement of the law. It doesn't enforce the law. The greatest protection that a child in school under peer pressure to take marijuana has is knowledge that there is a real law which is genuinely enforced. He or she can turn around to the person pressing them and say, look, I'm not stupid. I don't want to go to prison. I don't want to be barred from my chosen profession for the rest of my life. I don't want to be banned from ever travelling to the United States, thanks very much, or lots of other countries. So no, I'm not going to take this stupid drug you're offering me. It's a huge defence against peer pressure, and as a result, it's also one of the only things the state can offer parents who are terrified that their children are going to go down this plug hole. And we don't do it. Why not? Because of the selfishness and the compromised nature of our own governing class.
I suppose Khan would argue it's the other way around, right? Which is that you sort of take a young life, they have a small amount of cannabis on them, and you kind of ruin that life and give them a criminal record. You make them interact with the criminal justice system at an early age, and all that comes from that.
Again, absolute tripe. The reaction of the criminal justice system to a first offence is generally quite sensible. They say, right, we're not going to sling you into jail for first offence. That would be ridiculous and disproportionate. What we are going to do is we're going to record this offence for maybe the next 5 years, but not elsewhere. It won't be declarable. We're going to give you a genuine caution, and that caution means that if you're caught again doing this, then you will go to prison. And that nobody's life is ruined after that unless they choose to ruin it. Someone might make a stupid mistake one evening and get caught, then they'd get that warning and caution. But on a second offence, they'd go to prison. It doesn't really, probably 3 months would be enough to shock most people. But the truth is, you can change the law by behaviour. You're much too young to remember it, but I very well remember the 1967 introduction of the breathalyzer on the roads of this country. My world was full of uncles saying, oh, I can drink cheerfully 5 or 6 pints, I'll drive better after that. But the moment the law came in, and the moment they had a way of detecting whether somebody was drinking over the limit, the amount of drink driving in this country collapsed because the law was introduced and enforced. It isn't enforced now, so in fact drink driving and indeed drug driving are on the increase, terrifyingly, but it was enforced and the enforcement was effective, and that is the difference. But that's what we hire the police for, seems to me. We hire the police to enforce the law. The police don't enforce the law. So if you hire somebody to do a job, if somebody's hired to do your job at the Spectator and doesn't do it, what happens to them? You get rid of them and you find somebody else who will do it. Well, that's my view of the police. If they won't enforce the law, train a new police force that will enforce the law and get rid of them. An urgent problem for our country, it seems to me, because I have seldom seen a more useless body than the police forces of these islands.
suppose one of the problems is that the majority of Londoners now support decriminalisation. Sadiq Khan is pushing out an open door here. I mean,
they've been propagandised because one of the reasons why the destruction of the alcohol laws in the 1980s took place so easily because the media was full of people who didn't like those restrictions and weren't prepared to point out any difficulties. Likewise, the political class. But you just have to accept that there are people who have been propagandized in this matter. When do you ever see in mainstream journalism, or particularly broadcasting, the arguments being made that I make? What happened when I published a book about it? Nobody reviewed it, except 2 abusive reviews, one in The Guardian, one in The Observer, by people who seem to me to have a very light acquaintance with the contents of the book. Might as well sunk without trace. Important subject, not wholly obscure person, major publisher, vanished. It really is up to people in the media, particularly, and in politics, to stop this ridiculous omertà, this refusal to accept the grave danger. Everyone should read Alex Berenson's "Tell Your Children" as well. An amazing conversation with his wife, who works in mental hospitals in the United States, and tells him in a conversation that almost all the violent patients that she's dealing with are all marijuana smokers. Almost all of them. I say almost. I don't really mean it.
But I suppose, given the media climate, given politicians, given the public support,
Well,
we're never sort of moving towards your position, are we? And do you think therefore
why
there's
not?
an element?
People should be ashamed of not moving towards my position. My position is correct. It's logically correct. It's backed by easily obtainable facts. So why is it that our media and our political class are so feeble on the subject? Why is it that we cannot be like Japan or South Korea, law-governed democratic countries which enforce their laws against marijuana?
Do you accept that our drugs sort of laws at the moment are a bit of a muddle and kind
No,
of
they're
don't?
not. They're perfectly clear, but we just don't enforce them.
Okay, so the situation then, is a bit of a muddle. With
It's
the
not
sort
a
of
muddle
lack
at all.
of
It's not.
with the lack of
there's
enforcement.
been, as the book which you haven't read because you've never heard of it, which is called, I repeat, "The War We Never Fought," the British establishment surrender to drugs. As it explains, there was a long process of surrender by the establishment to the drugs lobby.
But do you think there's a sort of an element of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good? And
No.
almost,
And
it's almost worse to have inconsistent laws applied than just to not have them
What's
at all.
inconsistent? At the moment, we consistently do not apply the law. That's not inconsistent.
Well, it's an inconsistent position, isn't it?
It's cowardice, it's negligence, but it's not inconsistent.
It's inconsistent from the point of view of a user, though, right?
Well, no, the user knows perfectly well that he can buy and consume his drug without fear of prosecution. That's perfectly consistent. And for goodness sake, what do you think half these electric motorbikes speeding around London are doing?
I can believe
What
that.
is it
I
that
can
they're-
believe that.
What is it that they're delivering? It's not always pizza. It's big business. And look at the number of marijuana farms which are constantly being uncovered by the police.
So I guess a final.
It's probably our most successful agricultural sector. It's perfectly consistent. Everybody in it knows that by and large you can get away with it.
So turning finally, I mean, as opposed to what we would like, do you think Sadiq Khan is going to have his way? Do you think weed is going to be decriminalised in your lifetime?
It's like asking for a rainstorm after it's rained. It's already happened. We have de facto decriminalisation. I don't think that any government, the attitude of both Labour and the Tory parties on this is a pretense, a pretense of public toughness while continuing in reality a policy of laxity. That's what they do. So they will continue to maintain these laws. Also, they are obliged, and we are, say, a member of the United Nations Security Council. We are therefore particularly obliged to abide by treaties which say that we must maintain these laws on our statute book. What they don't say is that we must enforce them. So it's easy for them. It's the get out they discovered long ago. And unless people, I mean, particularly this is down to people who have children or grandchildren who are going to be affected by it, unless people start campaigning very, very hard for the other thing, this is the way it will go. But whenever I read of a knife crime in London, whenever I read of a rampage killing, I look carefully, and generally what I find is someone who usually has been seriously using marijuana for a very long time. And when I can't find it for sure, I often find a pattern in life. The child who was perfectly happy and well behaved and content and generally socially normal till the age of around 12, whereupon they totally changed their character, which suggests to me the same process. They encounter this drug in schools where it is readily available, and it doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens to a significant number of people. They take it. They become permanently mentally ill, and in some cases they become severely, dangerously violent. If you want a society in which that is normal, then continue as things are. If you don't, then listen to me. This is the chance you've got. I'm giving it to you. Here I am. Listen to me. I'm right. It's time people began, instead of ignoring me or sneering at me, to say, okay, well, if we have a better argument, we need to deploy it. But you haven't, because all the facts and all the logic go my way.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Pleasure.